Well, good morning, everyone. Looks like we're still getting a few attendees here. I apologize for those of you who signed on early. You're going to hear this 3 times, but we welcome you to the webinar series. And this morning we will have Emily Krekelberg from the University of Minnesota talking about some grain bin safety topics with us. While we have a few more people add on, I just mentioned that if you want CCA credits, we'll have that code available at the end of her talk. And following the formal presentation today, we'll have an informal debriefing. I'll put a link in the chat when we're done with Q&A, and you are more than welcome to join that that Zoom link and just debrief with us, discuss, with the virtual times we're in right now, it's kind of hard to get that after the meeting discussion. So feel free to join that if you're interested at the end. Lastly, I would mention that there's a Q&A feature in this version of Zoom. And if you click that Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen, you can ask questions throughout the presentation, and I will work through them at the end and make sure that we answer as many as possible and get them to Emily before the end of the webinar today. So thanks for joining us. While Emily gets her presentation uploaded, I'll give her a little introduction here. She grew up on her family's dairy near Le Sueur, Minnesota, and she works for the University of Minnesota as an extension educator for farm safety. So at SDSU, we actually have someone that focuses on farm safety and youth, but we don't have someone that just focuses on farm safety. So we're really glad to have her here today. She focuses on grain bins, safety, livestock safety, tractor safety, farmer mental health, and suicide prevention. A passion of hers is advocating for wellness in agriculture, and she has her bachelor's of science in animal science and her master's in ag education from the University of Minnesota. So thanks for joining us today, Emily. And without further ado, I will let you start.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for asking me to be a part of your Crop Hour series. It's been really cool for me to see the different things you're doing. And it's fun when you work for Extension in another state and you get to see how other states do things and get some good ideas going. So I really appreciate that. I was really excited to be asked to join all of you. I have had the opportunity to do a little bit of work with SDSU Extension in the past. Through various things. I have been with the University of Minnesota Extension for about 7.5 years. And prior to that, I worked in in my time with Extension, I worked in central Minnesota. I was a dairy educator, and now as of April, I am the extension educator for farm safety and health. So I work statewide and beyond the state as well, of course, tackling farm safety topics, health and wellness in farming, all of those things. And so we are going to be talking about grain bins today, and I call it, staying safe and staying alive. And we are going to do a little bit of grain bin safety 101, but then I wanted to take a different approach to thinking about how we can be safe around grain bins and on the farm in general as well. So before we get started, I always like to ask people to reflect on something. And that is, what's your why? So why are you here? Why are you at this webinar? I know some of you, of course, may be getting some of your CCA credits and things, but really, why do we want to be safe on the farm? Why does this matter? Why, what motivates us? What is the reason we do what we do? And I get asked that question a lot, just in my work, in people saying, hey, why do you do this? Why does this matter? So you can see this photo up on the screen, and those two people are part of my family. So the older gentleman there in purple, that is my dad, Dale. And then next to him in the red is my brother, Jake. Now, if you look closely at Jake's right elbow, you might notice that is in fact a prosthetic. And what you can't see is that my dad's right leg is also a prosthetic. So Jake is an above the elbow amputee and my dad is an above the knee amputee. They were both injured in agricultural accidents. My dad's accident was, December 29th marked 48 years since he lost his leg. So I've never known him any other way. And my brother lost his arm. I think it was 4 years in October for my brother. So I was around for that. And even just growing up on a farm with a dad that has been in a farm accident that has one leg, farm safety has always been important to me. And it's always been something, in our family that we talk about, that we consider, just because we live it and we see what can happen. And we're very fortunate that both my dad and my brother are still with us. Some families are not so lucky. And now I know both of their accidents, again, were, resulted in amputation and involved equipment with an auger. And we certainly do use augers in grain handling as well. But we're talking, I know, also about grain storage. And to me, they're all different. Everything has its own unique hazards, but the goal is always the same, stay safe, stay alive. And so that's my why. And I like to share that with people because, I tell everybody, specifically when my brother was in his accident, because of course I was alive then, I will never forget the phone call that I got from my mother um, telling me. And I just remember in that moment, knowing what I do for work, swearing to myself that I will do anything in my power to make sure nobody else gets that phone call. Because it is not a phone call you want to get. And it does change your whole life. And again, yes, both of these people are still with us and we're so happy for that. But it has been hard. And these accidents, they take a toll. It's not just, these physical reminders that we see when I look at their prosthetics, you know, it's etched on their face. They deal with phantom pains, these things that there's nothing we can do to help them. Um, and that's really hard, and I don't mean to start this out on such a sad note, but I do like to talk a little bit about my family story just because they are such huge motivators for me. And I admire both my dad and my brother so much. They've shown really great resilience in so much adversity. And it's really an honor for me to be able to share their story and share my family story as a part of these types of conversations. So thank you for bearing with me on that. And I would just encourage all of you to think about what's your why, and maybe it is just having a picture nearby like this, something that reminds you of why this is important, why you do this. And so do that. And also, again, think about, you don't want to get that phone call, but also you don't want to have that phone call made about you either. And so there's all of these things that wrapped up into that. What's your why? The why is staying safe, staying alive. So we're going to go through just briefly some grain bin safety 101. I am really hopeful that a lot of what I'm about to say is review for you and not new information, but I am also a big proponent of you need to hear things repeatedly for them to sink in. And I think that these are things a lot of us have heard, especially if you grew up on a farm like I did your entire life. But I do like to go over it and just kind of get things in position for us. So we know the biggest thing with grain bins is there's a huge risk of entrapment. So that can be via flowing grain and being, pulled down into grain, bridge grain that collapses, and that kind of ties in with avalanching grain as well. So, and these principles, they kind of apply to grain bins and other storage facilities like silos as well. And so that's what we know the risk is. And I feel like we focus so much on that. And I really try to get more on the front end of it. So prevention over intervention. So I don't want there to have to be a grain bin rescue, right? That's my goal for people, is that they don't have to go into the bins. And so some of those preventative things, they're just kind of those everyday things that should be done or that can be a part of the routine. So bin maintenance, I think, is something that gets overlooked pretty often. Just getting the bin empty and then checking for leaks, checking for, holes, places where maybe water's getting in, and then you're getting those wet spots that become mold, and then they crust, and then, then you have to go into the bin to clean them out. And so making sure that your bin itself is in good condition, and if it needs repairs or holes need to be plugged up, making sure that that's getting done. And then another one, and I imagine that this was covered a lot over this week with the stored grain topic, the grain condition. Of course, the condition that you put the grain into the bin at is going to directly influence that next piece there, the management of it. And just being aware of what is the moisture when you're putting it in, and what still needs to be done, and are we checking on it, and do we know where the grain levels are at, and just some of those things that you can do too with simple tools, grain bin gauges, all of those. I know some of those things are an investment, but I always remind people that a lot of that stuff are cheaper than a funeral. So thinking about, again, this prevention piece. I am also not stupid. I know that people need to go into bins. I know that happens. I am here to tell you my preference is that it doesn't happen. But there are things to be keeping in mind. And this is just working around grain bins as well, not just within them, but having the proper safety equipment. So I already talked about gauges and different things for the bin themselves. Lockout, tagout, that's a really important process. Harnesses. So if somebody is entering a bin, they should have a harness on. They should be attached to a point rope, and there should be somebody outside that is, monitoring the situation and is there, if they need to be pulled out, if something does go wrong. I think we all are aware of a lot of tragic stories of people being lost in grain bin accidents and being entrapped. And I think things like harnesses, like having a second person on the outside there, is so, so critical. And with that too, I would also add, if you are ever in that position that you are the second person outside of the bin, please, 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 do what you can from outside the bin to help that person. And if they have that harness on and you're able to pull on the lead rope for it, great. We just in Minnesota, was this only a year ago? Maybe two. No, maybe just a year ago. We had a father and a son, and then the uncle, so the father's brother, they were all killed in a grain bin accident because the boy got trapped, the dad tried to rescue him, and then the uncle tried to rescue both of them, and they all unfortunately perished. And so that's why I really tell people, don't go in, don't try to play hero. That's what we have our rescue teams for, is for that job, because they only want to have to rescue one person, not multiple. In addition, just other equipment to think about would be respirators, hearing protection, all those things that we need to be aware of in other areas of the farm too. I think hearing protection is one that is vastly underrated. People don't use it. And I can tell, like with my dad and my brothers and everybody in my family that's on the farm, as they get older, you get a lot more, what, when you're talking to them. And that could have been prevented just with earplugs. So, think too about these safety pieces that are not just, we're trying to prevent accidents and death, but we're trying to also maintain our overall health. So speaking of overall health, that's really the part that I want to emphasize today. So I think that I could sit here and talk until I am blue in the face about safety and about, all the risks and all the things you need to do. And here's the style of harness you need and all those details. But I think, for me, safety starts with us, with the individual people and how we are doing. And there is a direct tie, to our health, to our wellness, and how we are able to handle these situations where safety is maybe in question, or we're putting ourselves in a hazardous position. So for the rest of my talk, I really plan to emphasize a little bit more on health, and you'll see as we go through how that ties in to farm safety in general, and specifically grain bin safety as well. So again, bear with me for a while. You might feel like we're kind of going off into the weeds here. I promise we'll come back out. But I just want to start this. I want to talk ever so briefly about well being, mental health, mental illness. I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, this is a mental health talk now. And yes, yes, it is, because I think this all ties back to that, to health in general. And mental health is a piece of that. As Sarah said in my bio when she was introducing me, I do also work a lot on farm stress related topics and do farmer suicide prevention. And yes, that it's very important to me. And I have just seen more and more, especially with what my family's been through and what I have seen other people go through, these connections between health and how we're able to keep ourselves safe based on that. So, wanting to talk briefly about well-being and wellness, I'll use interchangeably, same thing, mental health and mental illness. So, to put it simply, I like to use this visual. You may recognize it, just your standard old school milking stool. I'm a dairy girl, always and forever. And so this is something that's comfortable for me. And I use this to represent when I say wellness or health, your overall health and wellness. Think about this stool. Imagine you each have your own stool, right? And the stool is really you. And there are two major components to the stool, the seat and the legs. So the seat really represents you, but not just you, your ability to handle your load. And because think about what a seat on a stool or a chair does. That's the part you sit onto, that's the part that takes the load onto it. But besides that, it needs to be propped up with something. It needs to have supports underneath, and that's the legs. And so in this example, each one of those legs represents a different area of our health. And then when all of those legs are the same length, are strong, are well attended to, we can hold up that load so much easier. So imagine just sitting on a stool that has one leg that's an inch shorter than the other two. You can still be upright, you can still sit comfortably, but you're not going to be, I shouldn't say you can still sit comfortably, you can still sit. It's maybe not comfortable, you have to work a little bit harder. And so that's why it's really important that we're thinking about it, in the way all three of our areas of health need to work together. And now you're probably thinking, what are these three areas of health? So for me, and people use different examples, I really focus on physical health, mental health, and emotional health. Now, physical health, most people know what that means. It has to do with our body and the functioning of our bodies. And so taking good care of our bodies, resting if we're sick, eating good food, getting enough sleep at night, etc. And then there's mental and there's emotional health. And I think that I know I used to be confused by it too. Like I couldn't figure out how they were different. And they are different, but they really work as a tag team. But keep in mind that physical leg is there too. And so all three of these areas of health interact with one another. They feed off of each other. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but just think about when you're really stressed, you probably have some physical manifestation of that as well. So headache, stomach ache, something like that, a backache. So keep that in mind that they're all connected, but mental and emotional health, especially, like I said, they work as a tag team. So your mental health specifically refers to your brain, your mental functioning, your cognitive ability. And with mental health, it has to do with how we process our information, right? That's what our brain is in charge of. It takes in information, it processes it. Now, emotional health comes into play because emotional health is what informs the way we respond or react to the information we have processed. Now, this is important because when our mental health is suffering, so for example, if we are under a high level of stress, or if we do have a mental illness. So for example, I have both anxiety and depression. I've been diagnosed with both of them. And so what's happening is my brain still processes information, But somewhere in that processing, something gets warped, right? And that is just because I'm not thinking clearly. Again, if it's because I'm stressed or because I'm not following my treatment plan for my mental illness, that information gets warped. And so then it also gets warped in our emotional health and in our response to it because we haven't interpreted that information correctly. And so that's why sometimes when people are stressed or we know people who have a mental illness, their reactions or responses to things may seem inappropriate or uncomfortable. That's why, because their brain is misfiring or it's not telling them something correctly. They're absorbing the world a little bit differently than we are. And so, I just say that to kind of give you a little bit of clarity on why we see those things in individuals like that. So again, just think of this stool, keep this in your back pocket as we go through the rest of this presentation here, really thinking about the role that all three areas of health play and the role that they play equally in keeping us upright and keeping us held together and allowing us to handle the load of our life, our demands, so work, family, other responsibilities, etc. So I also now am really quickly going to dive in a little deeper on mental health and mental illness, just for 2 slides here, because I know for myself as well, when I first started getting involved in this work and really becoming an advocate for mental health, I did have some confusion about mental health and mental illness. Are they the same thing? Are they opposites? How does this all work? So in the old narrative, when we were still learning about our brains, and we will be learning, I think, until the end of time because brains are crazy and weird. But the old narrative had mental illness and mental health on the same spectrum at opposite ends. So they were, in fact, mutually exclusive. So either you had mental illness or you were mentally healthy. And then as we have learned more about our brains and about mental health and mental illness, we have found a new narrative. And so this is referred to as mental flourishing. So this has been studied by Corey Keyes. I believe he's out of Florida. But I love this visual. And this for me is what really made everything click in my head. So you can see here that we have the quadrants and we have these axes that cross each other. So we have the vertical axis, which is mental health. So that goes from optimal mental health at the top to poor mental health at the bottom. Horizontal axis, mental illness. So from left to right, it goes from severe mental illness to no mental illness. So again, it creates these quadrants. So quadrant 1, that would be on the top, so good mental health, and that would be all the way to the right, so no mental illness. So that's that stage of mental flourishing. Then we get down into quadrant 2. So we are still on the right side, no mental illness, but there's something going on with mental health. There's severe stress on it, something's going on. And so this is where we call people languishing, right? So there's some things aren't going great. And this is really where we want to be intervening with people. Now, of course, I do a lot of this in the context of farm stress and working with farmers. And so this is where we want to be getting in and having those conversations and checking in with people. And if we don't, or if that doesn't happen, they may flip over into quadrant 3. So not only is there still severe stress on their mental health, they're on the bottom, they're now on the left side as well. So there's a mental illness there. And more often than not, if they're in quadrant 3, it's because the mental illness has not been diagnosed or it has, but it's not being managed. So for example, I mentioned my diagnosis, I have anxiety and depression. And so I go to therapy once a week and I take a couple medications to manage my symptoms. So if I were to stop doing those things, it would likely cause me a lot of stress and I would be in quadrant 3 again, because I was there prior to that. And, we don't know everything about what causes mental illness, but there are some good guesses. And actually being in quadrant 2, so being under a lot of mental stress and doing nothing about it can cause mental illness in people. There's also potentially genetic ties, other things, but that is one thing. So that's why I say it's really important to be intervening in quadrant 2 when we can. Um, and then quadrant 3 is necessary. Absolutely. And so then that kind of takes us to quadrant 4. So we're going to flip back up. Optimal mental health. There's still mental illness there, but you can be flourishing and have a mental illness. And I know this to be true because that is me. Quadrant 4 is where I live every day. Do I still have bad days, days where I get a little extra stressed? Absolutely, because we're all human and bad days will happen. But for me, this graphic showed me that like you can be mentally healthy, you can have good mental health and have mental illness. And so the purpose of this, why I'm bringing this up, is just to show you, the differences between the two, but also showing you how mental health and mental illness do mesh together. They do have some interactions with each other, especially when we're looking in quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Ever so briefly, I'm going to talk about stress. I left the slide in here, these next couple slides. But just as we're thinking about stressors that impact farmers, right? We know all the economic stuff, the long work hours, farm transition is very stressful and very hard on families. It's a relationship thing. That's the thing with farming. It's a lot of families. And so you are making family decisions and business decisions, and the water gets muddy in a hurry. But then other things, crop yields, machinery breakdown, illness or injury. So I didn't mention when my brother lost his arm, we were still milking cows. We don't milk cows anymore at home, but we were still milking cows. And so my entire family was at the hospital with my brother. I could not even tell you who milked the cows the day of my brother's accident. I have no idea. I don't know. Um, but that was really stressful on our family, and of course on my brother and on my dad especially too. And so there's all of these stressors that we need to take into account. So I'm going to skip a couple slides here. And getting into identifying stress. And so now here, this is where we're going to start to talk about safety again. So stress can manifest in a lot of different ways, and it manifests differently in every person. So you can see here, there's kind of 5 major categories for signs of stress: physical, emotional, behavioral, cognitive, and self-worth. Now I put a circle around cognitive because that's the one I really want you to think about, right? When we are stressed, we are not thinking clearly. Memory loss, lack of concentration, difficulty with simple decisions, just being overwhelmed and having a hard time just assessing situations from a bird's eye view, from a really holistic standpoint. And so that's why I circled that. I think it's also important to keep the physical signs in mind as well, just as we talk about how physical, mental, and emotional health all interact with each other. So, of course, physically, when we don't feel well, that can stress us out. And when we're stressed, that can make us physically not feel well. So there's this give and take relationship there that we really need to be mindful of. And also on the physical side, issues with sleep. So sleeping too much, or especially not sleeping enough, which I know is very common in farming. Yeah, and so we really need to be mindful that people under stress probably aren't thinking at, their 100% best. In addition, when there is prolonged stress, this chronic stress, especially like we've been seeing the past few years, other things to be mindful of: increase in illness and increase in farm accidents. Those are the 2 big ones that, again, I circled here because I think that really gets to the farm safety piece. So increase in illness, again, just the interaction of our physical health with our mental and emotional health. and then an increase in farm accidents. And that could be, again, due to those cognitive pieces because we're not thinking clearly, or we forget to shut something off, or, whatever it might be. And also in some people, if they are under severe chronic stress, it's just complacency where they don't really, we don't really care about being safe. It's not that we're necessarily trying to hurt ourselves, but we're also not trying to do everything the way that we should. And so again, those are two pieces that I really circled, and that, we need to keep in mind that yes, when we're trying to identify chronic stress in others, but also as we think about it through the farm safety lens too. Okay, so what does this mean? I know I've kind of been getting at it, but what I'm getting at is that wellness is critical to farm safety. So this is where this, kind of becomes a farm safety talk again. You will have less fatigue, less brain fog, quicker reflexes, better decision-making abilities when your wellness is at a high level. And again, that includes everything: physical, mental, and emotional. So making sure that you're getting enough sleep, eating good meals, being physically active. And on the mental side, taking care of yourself and allowing yourself to explore thoughts and feel different things. And on the emotional side too, being able to really recognize what you need and being able to express that, because also in emotional health, that's really tied to our social health as well. So having those social structures in place to support us. So with this, and again, these next couple slides are taken from one of my farm stress talks, but I just think that they're so important in any context when we're talking about health and safety. And so you've maybe heard this one. Adjust your own oxygen mask. If you've ever flown, they do the safety messages, and cabin loses air pressure, these masks will come down. And they always say, adjust your mask first before helping others. And so that's something that I just always like to remind people of, that, I think it's very, very natural for humans, but especially in agriculture. Agriculturalists are caretakers of each other, of land, of animals. And that is really awesome. And it's very, very admirable. But, all of that selflessness can really take its toll. And, we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and adjusting our own oxygen masks as well. So I tell people, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to practice intentional well-being. And I know that probably sounds really lofty and up there, but it's not. It's just about doing those simple things, doing that self-care. And I know that's become a really popular buzzword lately. Self-care, in its simplest form, is any deliberate action you take to attend to your well-being. Sleep is self-care. Eating is self-care. Talking to your friends and family, that's self-care. It doesn't need to be, it's not this singular event. Self-care is really about making decisions every single day that are for you and for your wellness. And I always remind people, self-care is not selfish. Needing a lunch break so you can get something good to eat, that's not selfish. That's going to keep you upright, keep you going. Your brain has an absolute need for glucose, so that's also going to help with that brain fog piece. All of those things. And so I really like to tell people that. And then you might think, how do I do this? So I'm not going to get super deep into this, but just several strategies to promote wellness. I hope these are things that you're already doing. And especially in high stress situations on the farm, these things can be really critical. So top of the list there, deep breathing. Like, yes, it's that simple. And deep breathing is exactly what it sounds like. You're just going to take some breaths. And I'm sure we've all been in arguments or very heated situations where ourselves or somebody else says, just take a deep breath, and that's the last thing we want to do. But that's actually really good advice. Deep breathing, the entire point of it is to just get us to stop and to kind of ground ourselves, to get back focused into where we are. And, you know, again, it kind of ties in with that next one, that meditation, reflection, grounding piece. And in deep breathing, all you're doing is just taking a few breaths and focusing just on that. Push those other thoughts out of your head for 3 breaths. They will be there waiting when you're done. I promise. You're not going to lose them. So set those aside, take some deep breaths just to help get yourself regrouped and kind of back on it, back on the same page if you're with another person. Meditation, reflection, grounding. So, again, that's just all about expanding on those deep breathing principles of really getting back to yourself, getting back to the moment, remembering you can only do one thing at a time. And also, and this ties in with the next one, positive mindset. See how these are all building on each other. Um, you know, reflection or journaling, it can be something really simple. I want so badly to be somebody who journals, and it's just really hard for me to do. So instead, I try to write something every day. And so sometimes it's just as simple as I write down 10 things I'm grateful for that day. Or it's like, uh, since it's the start of the new year, I've kind of been on, you know, like, what are my rules for 2021? You know, my rules for life, my rules for living. So for example, one of them is bring the joy. And so bringing joy to what I'm doing, and to others. So things that all of that, that's meditation, reflection. It doesn't need to be, you know, you're sitting there with your legs crossed on the floor, you know, like in a dark room with a bunch of plants like that. If that's what you want to do and that works for you, great. And if it's not, also great. And then, yeah, so that helps with that positive mindset, being grateful, practicing gratitude, and also just thinking about the way you talk to yourself. You know, a lot of us have that internal monologue that's always going. And I think that we're really prone to beating ourselves up in that internal monologue. And something a colleague told me that I've just carried with me is, you know, think about the things you're saying to yourself. And if that is not something you would say to your best friend or to your mother, why are you saying it to yourself? So, you know, if you're just getting down on yourself, like, I'm so bad at my job, or da, 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 like, would you tell your friend that they're bad at their job? You know, your closest relationship should be with yourself. So be mindful of that. Other things here, really quickly, physical activity. So, so, so important, of course, for that physical health piece. But as we know, it also ties into our mental health and our emotional health. You know, for me, I am one of those people. I get up at 4:30 every morning. I go to the gym. And for me, it checks all the boxes. I get physical activity. Mentally, it makes me feel so good because also it's self-care. It's something I'm just doing for me. I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. It feels good. It helps me stay healthy and be strong. And then also on the emotional side, you know, there's a social aspect there. You know, I have my friends at the gym and the people you wave to and say hello to, and so it's nice to have all of those things. Um, and so it was really hard when gyms were closed in Minnesota, but we're back open now and we all wear our face masks, and that's been working, which is good because I know a lot of people missed that piece. And when we were really in the thick of things, a lot of people that were feeling really stressed or anxious, a lot of them cited that. This is just anecdotally, but you know, saying, yeah, being out of the gym has really messed with me. Similarly, hobbies. So hobbies can be things that are related to physical activity, like running. They can be things like watching sports, reading. Again, these tie into self-care. So these things that you do that are just for you, that you enjoy. And I have another colleague who has a really great rule. They say you need to have a hobby outside of your career. So, you know, for example, I'm again like I'm a dairy girl, and so I'd be like, "Oh yeah, my hobby is going to cattle shows." And like it is, and I do enjoy that, but it's like I also need to do things that are outside of how I grew up and what I know and what I eat, sleep, and breathe every day. Uh, Connect with your social network. That can tie into a lot of these things as too, physical activity, hobbies, etc. And then lastly, I just put speaking with a mental health professional up there. Just let this be your friendly reminder, because I've had a lot of friends say this to me. They're like, well, yeah, I feel like I should go to therapy, but like like I'm not sick or I'm not crazy or I'm not depressed or and you don't need to be. That's the time to go, is before you really need it. It's another one of those prevention measures. All right. So what this all comes down to, and what I always say is, healthy farmers have healthy farms. And I know what my interpretation of this is, and I invite you to make your interpretation. I would imagine that they're going to have some similarities, but also some differences. And so, healthy farmers have healthy farms. If we can't take care of ourselves, which is the most basic piece of it, how are we expected to take care of our farm and be safe on our farm and be able to prevent accidents and notice hazards and do all of these things? And so that's kind of the final thought that I want to leave this with, as we wrap up here, move into Q&A. Healthy farmers have healthy farms. Another thing that I like to say to people, and I thought about this last night to add the slide, and do you think I remembered to? No. But another thing that I say is slow down, think twice, and stay safe. So when we slow down, we allow ourselves to fully think through what we're doing to make those sound decisions, and that can help us stay safe. So those three little two-word phrases, they all connect, they all build off of one another. And so I always remind people of that too. Um, I know that this was maybe a little bit of a stretch, but for me, it makes sense. Grain bin safety ties back to wellness. Any form of farm safety will tie back to our wellness. And so I really encourage you to think outside the box and to think about that, and what are you doing now, and what can you maybe start doing too? What else can you add to make sure that you really are maintaining that health, especially so that physically and mentally and emotionally you feel well, and that you're not so overwhelmed that you're slipping up or making mistakes. A lot of the farmers that I have talked to, so besides just my own family, but other farmers that have been injured, that's a pretty common theme. A lot of them will say something along the lines of, I was just really tired. I was just so stressed. I was just going way too fast. So slow down, think twice, stay safe. So with that, and that's just my personal, make your mental health a priority. You can see my contact information on there. We'll see if there's any questions or anything here once I wrap this up. But if you would prefer to reach out to me privately, please do. Please do. You can see my contact information there. You are more than welcome to send me an email, give me a call, and we can talk more about this or anything farm safety and health. But yeah, so with that, again, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for having me. Thank you, everybody who attended, for being here. I hope you learned something new. Yeah, and I think we'll see if there's any questions.
Yes, thanks, Emily. That was great. I think there's just a lot to be learned and thought about and understood when we relate farm safety back to mental health and wellness. So really appreciate that tie-in. We have quite a few people here, and I'm waiting. I think feel free to use the Q&A. Be aware that whatever you type in there will just come to the host here, and we can answer it live or answer it later. Here's a question for you, Emily, from Russ. Do you think farmers acknowledge mental issues better in recent years? Why or why not?
It's a really great question, Russ. I'm going to say yes. I mean, I think we know that it's been a really popular topic. Um, and so I think people are more aware of it. And as we continue to have these conversations, that helps break down that stigma and allow people to get more comfortable with the topic. You know, every single time that I talk about farm stress, I have at least one person who, if we're in person, will come up to me after the meeting or will send me an email or give me a call later, and share with me their story about their journey with mental health and or mental illness. And so I think that opening up these conversations and having them has been helpful. And I think people are more aware of it. Um, I don't know that there's the awareness piece, and then there's the, are you doing something about it, the action piece based on that awareness. And so I think we're still building on that. A lot of great things have happened, and I think a lot of great things are going to continue to happen with that, as long as we stick to it and keep working on it. I know there are some projects in the north central region of the US that I'm involved in. SDSU Extension is as well. I work with them to address this. And so, yes, I think people are more aware. I think that that's, they're getting better at acknowledging those things. But there's more work to do. I guess that's how I would say it.
Great, thank you. I think we'll give a couple minutes here for questions, but just hang on the line here for a second. A couple announcements while we are answering more questions. We really appreciate you all attending, and I've already had a couple questions. If you are interested in the recordings, if you want the recording of today's presentation by Emily or any of the ones that have happened in the past, they will be up on our website at the same page you registered for this event today. So that link is in the chat, as well as we'll have a poll here in just a minute to get a feel for how you liked today's webinar. But beyond that poll, we'd also really appreciate it if you could fill out the survey that will be emailed to you later today. And that just covers the week as a whole and gives us a little bit more idea if you liked the grain storage topic today, and if there's something further you'd like to hear in the rest of the webinar series. So if you can look for that email, we'd appreciate that. And I still have some questions coming in here, which is great. But I just want to mention that lastly, we'll have an informal debriefing after this. So if you just want to shoot the breeze, network with other people that are on this call, or ask more questions to Emily, you can certainly do that. That is the last link in the chat. That's a Zoom meeting where we can all talk and see each other's cameras. So feel free to join that meeting. I will start that shortly. And let's see here. Other questions I have at the moment are all covered. Okay, things I just covered. Does anyone else have any other questions? Please feel free to ask questions. You can even do it anonymously with Zoom. That's one of the great features. So if you have an anonymous question, that's totally fine. We'll give everyone a couple minutes here. But really, we appreciate you all coming, and we appreciate, Emily, you taking the time to talk with us. And again, if you want to register for more webinars, you can go to our website on the crops page and register for them 1 week at a time for as many as you'd like. And again, that's where the recordings will be as well. I will share the CCA credits, but in the meantime, if someone still has a question, please feel free to put that in the chat. So while we're scanning that, looks like there is another question. Emily, do you think farmers understand fully the link between farm safety and mental health?
I think we're getting there. I think that that's why I spend so much time talking about it, because I think that, we talk a lot about farm safety. In recent years, we've talked a lot about farm stress. But yeah, not that interaction. And I think it allows us a fresh way to look at it and to realize that, mental health and being mindful of stress goes beyond just preventing suicide, for example. There are other pieces at play there. And I think that safety piece is really huge too, just because of awareness. And I mentioned we have a lot of families on farms and children. And in a majority of farm accidents that involve children, the child is not actively participating in a farming activity. They just happen to be in the area. And some of that can be due to adults not paying attention, or they're so stressed, there are other things happening, that they're kind of missing those pieces. And so, yes, I think we're starting to learn more about that link. I don't know that everybody fully understands it. I don't know that I fully understand it, but it is something that I do plan to learn more about and to do some research on, actually, is what that link is and how it exists and how we can't really have one without the other. It is a balance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know a lot of conversations that we've had over grain storage gets into safety, and I'm not a safety expert, but it almost comes back to complacency, a lot of times. And why do we get complacent? And is it because we're tired? Is it because we're not mentally healthy? There's a lot of different reasons. So I think that's a really great question. All right, are there any further questions before we go into our debriefing? Again, that link is the last link in the chat there. You can click on that and it will take you to a separate meeting. And then you can talk, have your camera on, feel free to discuss anything. Yesterday, we talked about the weather for the first, like 10 minutes. So it's pretty informal. We'll give it a minute here, but I'm not seeing any. If you have any other questions about the webinar series, please feel free to reach out to us. But without further ado, I think that's all we have today. Thanks, Emily, and to all of our participants.
Yes, thank you.